On this Wednesday night, hundreds of wildfires and dozens of evacuation orders and alerts put thousands of BC residents on the move or on notice. Today, for the first time this summer, the province calls a state of emergency. Why now and what it means.
Also tonight, 4 months after the Humboldt tragedy unleashed unprecedented Canadian generosity. Today, the first GoFundMe payments to the survivors and to the families of those who didn't. Why it took a judge to get the money flowing. This is The National.
It may not rival last year's historically brutal wildfire season, but here in BC, even in Vancouver, you can see the smoke. And this summer has been taxing. Almost 400,000 hectares of land have burned, and there are more than 500 active fires right now. It's one of the worst wildfire seasons this province has seen in the last half century, and we're just in the middle of August. Here are the fires people are most worried about. And I'll tell you, there are a lot of them. Some threatening homes and livelihoods, others raging through remote forests, but all of them of concern. So tonight, as Briar Stewart shows us, the province is putting everything it's got on the table.
On the smoky shores of Francois Lake in northern BC, this ferry is running around the clock to shuttle evacuees to safety.
Taken right from the ferry, Francis Forrester Ferry.
Shirley Wilson left her home yesterday.
My one daughter said, Mom, it was like from hell to heaven, just black and stormy and smoky. And then we got to another area by Owen Lake and it was just blue skies and like heaven.
With hundreds of fires burning across the province, the BC government has declared a provincial state of emergency.
This decision has been made on the basis of advice that we have received in terms of the number of fires, the nature of the fires, as well as the long-term outlook.
By that, he means the weather. Firefighters from Australia, New Zealand, and Mexico have been brought in to provide support, and so have members of the Canadian military.
These are our neighbors, goats and sheep.
Ellen Reynolds left her rural property even before the evacuation order was put in place. She's now helping to take care of the hundreds of goats, sheep, and chickens that are displaced as well.
It was so black we turned all the lights on at 3 o'clock. And you know, like it's not just your place, it's your friend's place, it's your neighbor's place.
It's like 3 in the afternoon. That's how dark it is. Isn't that crazy?
The state of emergency is in place for 2 weeks. It can be extended, but officials are stressing that so far the situation this summer is much different than last year, when fires burned closer to larger communities and 70,000 people were forced from their homes. About 3,000, including Reynolds, are under evacuation order now.
We had ash and leaves and pine needles coming down in our yard, and I just didn't feel safe anymore.
She's trying to keep as busy as she can because it helps take her mind off the encroaching flames and the house she left behind. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Vancouver.
Now, the fires are one thing. The smoke, that's a whole other. It's been wafting into neighboring Alberta. That entire province is now under a special air quality advisory, and you can see why. This is what people in Calgary woke up to this morning, and it was a similar story in Edmonton. Environment Canada says the bad air is expected to stick around until at least tomorrow. Now, the impact of wildfires can go far beyond the weeks or months they burn. In south central BC, one community has spent the last few days sifting through a deadly mess a full year after a blaze ripped through their village. When a series of mudslides hit a highway near Cache Creek on Saturday, one of them was so big, moving so quickly, it swept a vehicle right off the road. Search teams are still trying to find the woman who would have been inside that car. People who live nearby have had to leave their homes, and nobody's quite sure what might come next. Anita Bath is there.
Kilometer after kilometer, mud lines the roadside, 17 slides in a matter of hours.
You could hear thunder like just coming your way, and then hail started happening like moments afterward.
Jordan Williams lives along Highway 99 near Cache Creek. He had minutes to grab his things and get out.
The most notice I had was I looked outside and our neighbor burst in. He said there's a river right outside the house.
He's thankful to be alive, but not everyone was that lucky. A powerful force of mud and debris came rushing down this mountainside. It was so strong, it swept away a woman who was driving by in her vehicle. Police tape is still up and rescuers are here today scouring the area, but this has now been turned into a recovery mission. 67-year-old Valerie Morris is missing, but remarkably, her husband managed to escape.
In this case, you had a lot of debris coming with it, which caused the vehicle to be pushed all the way down approximately 350 meters from the roadway.
Officials are blaming these mudslides on last summer's Elephant Hill wildfire. It got rid of vital trees and roots.
When we had that intense storm and the thunder, lightning, and hail, it caused the ground not to be able to absorb that fluid, and thus causing basically the landslide.
Now homes on either side are filled with dirt, parked cars encased in mud, impossible to move.
It's really hard on them because we just haven't fully recovered from last year. It was really an extreme event. It was a couple of months there where people were in danger.
But the worst may not be over. Until the ground returns to normal, there could be more freak mudslides, meaning the 2017 Elephant Hill wildfire could haunt residents for years to come. Anita Bath, CBC News, Cache Creek.
Let's take a look at what else we're working on tonight. They were both on the Genoa Bridge in Italy. The moment it collapsed, you'll hear two survivors describe the chaos as they ran to safety.
And Newfoundland's Mary Pratt found the beauty in everyday life. We'll look at the artist's life and legacy.
But first, Canadians helped raise millions of dollars in the days after the Humboldt bus crash. Tonight, there are still questions over how it will be split among the families. And bills for funeral and medical expenses have been piling up, a burden the survivors and the families of those killed just can't escape. $15.2 million was collected to help them after that horrendous collision back in April. It has so far been untouched because of red tape. But as Olivia Stefanovic tells us, that's about to change.
I wouldn't want to say very pleased, but good to see that it's moving forward, I think.
Scott Thomas says he's lost at least a month of work, and he hasn't been able to return to full-time employment since his son Evan died. He wants to use some of his portion of the donations to give back to others through sports scholarships.
I don't think anybody in their wildest dreams imagined that it would get to be as large as it was. And unfortunately, when things get to be that big, things take time. And this is the process that we have to undertake.
A Saskatchewan court agreed to fast-track a portion of the $15 million GoFundMe campaign today to help the victims. $50,000 will be given immediately to each of the 13 survivors and the families of the 16 people killed in the crash. The process involves holding the rest of the money until a 5-member advisory committee, approved today, decides how to divvy it up.
It's not going to be an easy job.
This is the first major test for Saskatchewan's new crowdfunding legislation, the first of its kind in Canada, meant to avoid disputes that can arise when huge amounts of money are involved.
So the statute creates a method of avoiding that mess.
This legal expert says the case may be precedent-setting, and other provinces will be watching closely.
The last thing you want the court to do is suffocate this process. So the court will try to enable it and then let the parties get along, getting the benefit out to the people who need it.
The advisory committee has been given a deadline, 90 days to consult with families and submit a draft report with recommendations on how to split the largest GoFundMe campaign in Canadian history. Checks for the interim payment of $50,000 each could go out within days. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Regina.
Crowdsourcing challenges are also an issue in Fredericton. At least 2 GoFundMe campaigns were launched after last week's deadly shooting to assist the families of the 2 civilians and the 2 police officers killed. But police say the campaigns were never sanctioned. So GoFundMe says money won't be distributed until there's a clear plan in place for who gets it. The force has launched its own memorial fund for Constable Sarah Burns and is expected to do the same for Constable Rob Costello. For a second night, rescuers in Genoa, Italy, are searching for people still buried under the rubble of that collapsed highway bridge. Officials have no idea how many people are missing, but we know at least 39 were killed. Genoa is in the middle of 2 days of official mourning, and today the Italian government approved a 12-month state of emergency as politicians now look for someone to blame for the disaster. The rescue crews are digging through tons of debris, but it's unlikely anyone could still be alive. One reason officials don't have an exact number of missing people, today is a major Italian holiday, and it's hard to know who was caught up in the disaster and who's just away on vacation. Either way, the digging will continue.
Our work will end when the last victim has been pulled out of the rubble.
Prosecutors are looking into the cause of the disaster, including design flaws and poor maintenance. But Italy's transport minister is blaming the company that operates the bridge. He wants its top execs to resign. The government is also pursuing a €150 million fine, and a negligent homicide investigation is now in the works. Meanwhile, pity the hundreds of people who live under the bridge and don't know if they'll ever be allowed to return home. Their apartment buildings may have to be demolished. Then there are the people who were on the bridge when it fell but live to tell their stories today. These two women from England were driving across with their 2 kids when they saw a commotion up ahead.
People started shouting, waving their arms to reverse out the windows and
tooting horns and everything like that. And so we tried to reverse and we couldn't go anywhere, and the car in front hit the front of our car, and then people were running, screaming in Italian, run,
everyone, out, cars, out, cars.
So we just literally, kids run, because we didn't know what was happening. We made our son just run, and we sort of grabbed our daughter's hand and started running, but we couldn't pick her up because all the car doors were flying open, people everywhere, torrential rain was coming down.
Screaming, and our daughter took her shoes off because she was just going to sleep before.
She hasn't got her glasses. We left everything in the car and we just ran for our lives.
Wow. For Canadians watching the aftermath of the Genoa disaster, a big question might be, could it happen here? So Jayla Bernstein asks the experts.
Canada is no stranger to aging infrastructure, and yet engineering experts say the odds are slim that a deadly tragedy on the scale of Genoa would happen here. We met up with a civil engineering professor, Bruno Massicotte, to find out how a bridge like this one is monitored.
A bridge inspector would look at the most critical elements, so the girders, the deck, and the columns. Sometimes there are more elements to look at. For example, some bridges like this one has an arc.
In Canada's 2 largest provinces, Quebec and Ontario, bridges under provincial jurisdiction are inspected every 1 or 2 years at least. But there's no federal standard for how often those checks happen.
The rate of inspection, the frequency of inspection is not enforced in any code. So each jurisdiction decides to do what they feel it's best for their bridges.
Still, he says bridges in Canada generally follow the same safety standard, though North America does have a past tarnished by its own failures. One deadly lesson was the 1987 collapse of the Schoharie Creek Bridge in New York State. 10 people were killed.
There was no formalized bridge inspection practice in Canada or Ontario, for that matter, prior to then.
While safety measures have improved, it was only 12 years ago when an overpass in Laval, Quebec, collapsed onto the highway below, killing 5. But that kind of tragedy has led to even more change. Take Montreal's Champlain Bridge, for example. It's at the end of its lifespan. Approximately 50 million vehicles cross every year. Sensors on the bridge continuously monitor the structure until its replacement is completed.
I would say that the public can sleep comfortably, and they should have no apprehension at all with respect to crossing any open bridge in Canada.
So the message from Canadian engineers: have faith in the system here. Jayla Bernstein, CBC News, Montreal.
Now on to some developing stories we are tracking south of the border tonight, starting with Donald Trump following through on a threat against one of his most vocal critics.
Brennan has recently leveraged his status as a former high-ranking official with access to highly sensitive information to make a series of unfounded and outrageous allegations.
The White House today announced that former CIA Director John Brennan has been stripped of his security clearance. They accuse him of abusing his access for partisan purposes and outright lying about the administration. But shortly after that announcement, Brennan hit back on Twitter, saying the move is part of a broader effort by Mr. Trump to suppress freedom of speech and punish critics. My principles are worth far more than clearances. I will not relent. U.S. newspapers, too, are lashing out at Trump. Tomorrow morning, you're going to see a coordinated move right across the country. Hundreds of papers, big and small, publishing editorials, all with a very clear message to the president and every American citizen, for that matter. Stop attacking us. The Boston Globe, which organized the campaign, writes, "This whole project is not anti-Trump. It's really pro-press." From the New York Times, insisting that truths you don't like are fake news is dangerous to the lifeblood of democracy, and calling journalists the enemy of the people is dangerous, period. And from the Falls City Journal, that's in Nebraska, we hold people in power accountable for their actions. Some think we're rude to question and challenge. We know it's our obligation.
See how that goes over. Ahead tonight on The National, he is set to become one of the biggest basketball players to come out of this country. And tonight, he's back at home. You'll hear from R.J. Barrett about following in his father's footsteps.
Yeah, first though, her work transformed pretty mundane things into objects of striking beauty. We'll look at the incredible life of Mary Pratt and the legacy she leaves behind.
And a little later, we'll have our moment of the day, or the reason I was howling in the newsroom today. The moment that two women in Newfoundland spotted a rare moose and then decided, thank goodness, to hit record.
Every time you see a moose, there's something magical about them. You want to stop and look at them.
Oh, my blessed Redeemer. Look at the size of them, Nancy.
I know.
Through her art, renowned Canadian painter Mary Pratt took the ordinary and made it extraordinary. Her depictions of household objects are so detailed, they look like photographs. Well, Pratt died yesterday in St. John's at the age of 83. And as Chris O'Neill Yates reports for us tonight, Pratt's legacy reached far beyond the canvas.
Mary Pratt's work has been defined by color and the way she captured light.
I think I trained myself from a very early age to think of the day in color.
Pratt's realism is depicted in everyday scenes, swatches of life illuminated on canvas.
People know a Mary Pratt. No matter how interested or not you are in the arts, it's easily recognizable, iconic images.
In the 1970s, Pratt's career really took off nationally. She delved deeply into making art after her 4 children with fellow artist Christopher Pratt had grown up. Her inspiration, domestic scenes that she made look as real as photos, earned her widespread acclaim.
To be reminded of the beauty and the pain that is involved in preparing a meal, the simple act of preparing a meal, or the beauty of light going through a jar of jelly.
Pratt thrived on the solitary nature of a painter's life. Publicly, she enjoyed tremendous success, but she also experienced deep personal loss.
She had 4 children. She carried twins, one stillborn and one just lived a couple days. She had 2 marriages, 2 divorces, heavily involved in the community.
Pratt was also known as a tireless advocate for art, a vocal lobbyist for the Provincial Gallery and Museum, The Rooms, now a centerpiece of local art and culture.
She was the one who bullied the government, bullied those politicians. They had no choice. She just made sure we were going to have it. What I remember the most is the gutsy way she lived her life, with guts, but also with grace, like always with grace.
But as you get older, and your life obviously will be shorter, you don't see this long extension of your life, but you can see an extension of your art. So gradually, I think, I'm beginning to think that art is more important to me than life. And maybe this is just logical and comes with age.
Pratt's art will live on in boardrooms, art galleries, and kitchens across her beloved Canada, a testament to how beauty and meaning exist in the most ordinary things in life. Chris O'Neill Yates, CBC News, St. John's.
Now, Pratt may have become a household name, but funny enough, she didn't always intend on becoming an artist. Have a listen to what she said about that in this interview back in 1972.
When I got to be about 10, my father said, "Now then, when you grow up, you're going to go to Mount A and you're going to take art." And I thought, well, that's rather useless, even though I really did like to paint. And he insisted, really, that I go and take fine arts, and I thought it was just too silly for anything. Why take fine arts? But he said, finally, well, when you get to be 40 and your children are all gone away, what good is anything else going to be to you? So I guess I have my father to thank, because he was a very wise man, and that's really all there is to that part.
That is such fascinating advice. Mary Pratt's children say one of their mother's greatest achievements was being named a Companion of the Order of Canada. That was in 1996. And in 2007, Pratt painted this portrait of former Governor General Adrienne Clarkson.
Up next on The National, she's faced the Prime Minister, addressed the United Nations. Autumn Pelletier is a fierce defender of safe drinking water for Indigenous peoples, and she's just 13 years old. So did you think to yourself at that point, like, well, why am I doing this? Like, this is too much for me as a kid.
Yeah, I think the bullying almost made me feel like quitting what I was doing.
Canada is getting a new statutory holiday. The exact date has not been set yet, but it won't be to celebrate an occasion. Instead, it's a day to remember and reflect on a dark chapter in Canadian history, the residential school system. Catherine Cullen looks at the significance.
Justin Trudeau has made several big gestures of reconciliation to Indigenous peoples, like apologizing for past wrongs.
We are sorry for not apologizing sooner.
And pledging to turn the building across from Parliament Hill into an Indigenous space. A statutory holiday to recognize the harm caused by residential schools would be the latest.
They were horrific. The term cultural genocide is entirely appropriate.
Ry Moran worked for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that spent 6 years studying the brutal legacy of residential schools. A statutory holiday was one of their 94 recommendations. Moran says it should be a day for reflection.
We cannot let ourselves off the hook for what we have done in the past. We do not escape our past.
But what would ensure that people actually spent the day off reflecting and not just relaxing?
It tells Canadians to learn about the impacts of the residential schools on First Nations people.
National Chief Perry Bellegarde says ultimately it's up to Canadians to decide how they spend the day.
To ensure that Canadians really get this, they'll have to embark that amongst themselves, in their heart, mind, and spirit, because education and awareness leads to understanding, will lead to action.
Beyond the gestures, though, what about the day-to-day challenges facing many Indigenous peoples?
The lives of many Indigenous peoples in this country are actually not getting better. In some regards, they're getting worse. Like we've got some very serious challenges that we need to address.
From clean drinking water to Indigenous children being removed by child welfare services, they are issues Justin Trudeau's government says it is working on. But progress can't come quickly enough for those whose lives depend on that change. Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Ottawa.
As Catherine mentioned there, the Prime Minister did pledge to eradicate all drinking water advisories in First Nations communities within the next 3 years. So we thought we'd check in with where things stand now. There are currently 73 long-term drinking water advisories on reserves, and the government says it's on track still to get rid of all of them by 2021. 67 long-term water advisories have been lifted since the Liberals came into power in 2015. But as part of its bid to try and fix the problem, the government at the same time expanded the overall number of water systems under its jurisdiction. And then there are the efforts of 13-year-old Autumn Pelletier advocating for water protection on the world stage. Hers is a story of dedication, even precociousness, but it's also a story of a girl and her family just searching for the right balance in a hectic teenage life.
We go out and pray for the water because the water is sick and it's contaminated, and we basically just do the water ceremony to pray for it for hopefully one day that that the water's clean.
The water on Manitoulin Island is mostly frozen on this bitterly cold day, but the prayer always has the same meaning. What may not be expected, it is being made by one of Canada's youngest water protectors, driven by the tradition and ceremony of her elders, and maybe even by a calling. Autumn Pelletier is just 13, and in most ways, just like any other teenager. She texts a lot. She giggles, she hangs with her friends, and she makes slime with her sister. But she's also a little bit exceptional. Almost without expecting it, she has become a visible activist for safe drinking water and clean waterways for Indigenous peoples.
Why do you care about it so much, do you think?
Well, I guess it just really affected me seeing and hearing that there's First Nations communities that can't drink their water, and it's contaminated because of pollution and pipelines from breaking. And yeah, just one day it really affected me, and I actually cried about it. And it makes me really mad when I think about it. And I even talk about it with my friends a lot.
She is also inspired by her mother, Stephanie, who has worked to make sure her girls are raised with a deep sense of identity and traditional Anishinaabe teachings.
Do you think that people listen to her in a different way? And they might listen to you or me or someone else who's been doing it for 20 years?
I think so, because I can get really overwhelmed as a mother thinking about how big this has gotten.
But do you think there's something special in her about this?
When she came into the world, she was so serious. She came out she just had this look on her, and I almost couldn't look at her. And she didn't even cry or anything. She just stared at me, and I said, "Who are you?"
This is the dress that I usually wear to my talks, where I public speak. Because when you're wearing a skirt, it's used for protection. What I've been told through ceremonies is Mother Earth has been surviving for millions of years without us, and it's taken us less than a century to destroy her. And Mother Earth doesn't need us, but we need her. That's what I tell people when I wear this dress.
It would seem, too, that people are listening. There is something about a young face of the next generation that may cause people to listen differently, more closely. Autumn was nominated for the Children's International Peace Prize in 2017. She is asked to speak in this country and around the world, and she had one rather overwhelming meeting with the Prime Minister.
What did you want to say to him? Do you remember?
I just said to him, I'm very unhappy with the choices you made and broken promises to my people. Then he said, I understand that. And then
you were really emotional, too.
Then I started crying, and then all I said was the pipelines, and then he said, I will protect the water.
She says, I understand that there's so many communities that don't have clean drinking water, and it costs a lot of money. She knows that, and she says cleaning one or two communities is better than not being able to clean any.
In fact, where Autumn lives on Wikwemikong First Nation, there are no drinking water problems. And recently, the federal government committed even more money to eliminate long-term boil water advisories across the country by 2021. Change seems to be happening, if slowly. But for Autumn, it may come at a cost.
Verbal bullying all the way to physical bullying, where kids would be throwing balls in my face like basketballs and pushing me.
Why, though?
I don't know.
They were jealous, or?
Because I had to go to counseling because I was feeling bad about myself. And they just told me it was probably because of jealousy.
So did you think to yourself at that point,
well, why am I doing this? Like, this is too much for me as a kid.
Yeah, I think the bullying almost made me feel like quitting what I was doing.
Have you been able to forget about that, or how are you?
I forgot about that a long time ago.
Yeah, it still upsets you a little bit,
Yeah.
though, I can tell.
Those difficult moments seem to have made Autumn stronger and able to deal with using her voice to call for change.
So we're gonna go over our schedule here to see where we're at. We're going through this first page pretty quick.
It seems like a lot. Like, you just, the ones that are already scheduled, it already seems like there's a lot.
There is a lot. And you know what? There'd probably be more.
Did you, during that time, ever say, this is too much for a kid?
No,
Or too much for me?
Maybe more me, because I'm a single parent and I raise my kids by myself, and a lot of times I'm alone and I don't have a lot of, like, I have family support, but I don't have physical support.
You're not making money off of this?
No, we're not making money off of this, and sometimes when we travel, it's on my dime. Here we go. So here's some of your ideas.
So, because of Autumn and her mom and her sister, the demands have been pulled back. But there was one invitation that could not be passed up, speaking to world leaders at the United Nations.
No one should have to worry if the water's clean or if they will run out of water. No child should grow up not knowing what clean water is, or never knowing what running water is.
Do you realize how big a deal it is?
Yeah, because this is bigger than basically everything I've ever done. For me, this work, I'm going to keep on doing this work for the rest of my life. I hope that I can make a change and people from all over the world be to have clean drinking water.
So it is worth it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Autumn, as you might expect, has lots of plans in the future. She might become a lawyer or a chief or a politician. But of one thing, she is certain. She will continue this work that she has already begun.
Very impressive young woman. Okay, next on The National. Canada's newest basketball star is back home tonight. RJ Barrett opens up about his secret weapon on the sidelines.
The game, if you're watching me, I look over at him a lot, and he just makes a certain face, and I just know what it is. So we had that certain type of connection, off the court to, loving father, always there for my brother and I.
Tonight on The National, the leader of the federal Conservatives is making clear Maxime Bernier does not speak for the party. Andrew Scheer released a statement tonight all about a series of tweets by Bernier in which he, Bernier, accused the Prime Minister of promoting, quote, extreme multiculturalism. In Scheer's statement, personally, I disagree with politicians on the left and the right when they use identity politics to divide Canadians. I will not engage in this type of politics. It was back to school today at Florida's Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, but under tightened security. It's the first new school year since a gunman opened fire on campus in February, killing 17 people. Students returned from summer break to find a number of changes, including new cameras, fences, and classroom locks. They're also now required to wear photo ID badges on campus. Well, at 18 years old and standing 6'7", Canadian basketball phenom RJ Barrett is a real force on the court. He was U.S. college basketball's top recruit for 2018. And tonight, he played his debut game with Duke University in his hometown of Mississauga, Ontario.
Here comes Barrett. He's going to go by and go. And playing in his own backyard.
So Duke is in Canada to play 3 exhibition games before the season gets started in the fall. First up, Toronto's Ryerson University, and an impressive show from Barrett before a sold-out crowd. Now, he goes by RJ, but his full name, Rowan Barrett Jr., carries a lot of weight. In the early 90s, his father helped put Canadian basketball on the map. Earlier this spring, CBC Toronto host Dwight Drummond caught up with both father and son.
Quickly goes the other end, and Barrett throws it down with the left hand. And he says there's more where that came from.
Oh, R.J. Barrett.
Triple-double threat. Underneath, Barrett slams it home.
R.J. Barrett has won every major award a high school basketball player could possibly win. In fact, this young man, with the same baby face I've seen for years, is already being touted as the next LeBron James.
Come in is R.J. Barrett. Barrett just keeps smoking.
Perhaps his biggest accomplishment to date, leading Canada to a historic win over the U.S.
He has been utterly sensational.
Before ripping apart Italy to win Canada's first ever gold medal in international basketball competition.
I've made a decision that next year I will be attending Duke University.
RJ was the #1 rated recruit in the world before choosing to play basketball for powerhouse Duke University this fall. But make no mistake, he's headed to the NBA and quick. Right now, nearly every basketball expert on the planet has projected him to be the #1 pick in next year's draft. And if you ask RJ, that sounds about right.
Pretty simple, go to college and go to the NBA and be a star.
And right there with him, throughout his journey, his father, Rowan Barrett, a Canadian basketball icon himself.
Here comes Rowan Barrett. Career high gets even higher.
I've known Rowan Barrett for years and have seen firsthand just how special this relationship is. I recently visited their family home in Mississauga, just outside of Toronto, to catch up and see how father and son are doing after this whirlwind year. Being the most decorated teenager playing basketball in North America right now since LeBron James. I mean, it's hard for me just from the outside to fathom, but what's it like thinking about it from the person who actually pulled it off? Because when you look at that award, that Naismith Award, and you see those names, that's basketball royalty. Kobe's on there, LeBron's on there. It seems like it's not even sinking into you, man.
I don't think it really has, sunk in yet. Just, I don't know, I had so many goals and I was able to achieve them and I'm really happy, but there's so much more that I have to do. So I feel like when it's all said and done, I'll really be able to
Then you're gonna look back?
Yeah. I mean, everything, that's happened this year has been great. I enjoyed the ride, but it really all started when, playing for my country.
That's a big deal for
yeah.
you. Is that because of your dad and he did it too?
He did
I mean, he's got his Team Canada
Yeah.
jersey up on the wall in this house, but now you can get your jersey up there beside him.
For sure. So, that means a lot, just continuing the legacy.
I think, well, you were only 16 at the time, right? Were you 16 or you just
I just turned 17.
Okay,
yeah.
you just turned 17. Talk about that experience representing Canada and bringing us our first gold medal like that in competition.
It was tough. At the beginning, I was the youngest guy. I had to earn my respect, earn a lot of things, but as soon as we got to the tournament, we just started clicking together. We had an early loss, but then we were able to, knock off the U.S. and just...
You say that so nonchalant. I was able to knock off the U.S. I don't know, like the world basketball powerhouse who wins everything year after year. This was a first for Canada.
I feel like we had guys that, played in the U.S., so they're going up against American guys all the time, so no one was scared, So.
And when you got off that plane and you came home to that hero's welcome, come on.
See, we didn't really know, we won, and then we're like, okay, what happens now? And then when we got home, everyone was there. We were surprised, but we also realized we did something great for the country.
I still I listen to you talk now, and I listen to you like you're happy, you're smiling. None of this is getting to you. It's not going to your head at all, like all of this.
Nah, I have many people in my life to keep me grounded, so.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Who's that? Is that mom? Is that dad?
Mom and dad all the time.
What do they tell you? What are some of the lessons you get? I'm sure a little brother's like, whatever, you're not that good.
Exactly. It's kind of hard when your dad's an Olympian. So when you do things and you realize, okay, well, his jersey's on the wall right there. He's done a lot more.
Do you remember watching him play when you were younger? And did you want to be like him?
I remember in Europe watching him play, and then I would run on the court and try to shoot after.
So do what he did?
Yeah, so I just remember, always trying to follow him.
So if he made a basket, one leg up in there, you'd go and
try to practice those moves.
He'd be always on the court after the games and shooting and coming into practice. And the great thing was that my professional team always had a club team at the lower ages. So while I was playing in the men's, he would be playing with the children.
And you got to wear the same
and
uniform
he got the same
as Dad?
uniform as Dad and everything else, and he had the same number and everything else, and you know, it was a good early beginnings for him.
Did you know right away, did you have this plan in your mind that, you know what, this kid is going to be a baller, man, you know, like his daddy?
You know, initially, no. I mean, you never, you know, when they're young, but this was actually his first team in Canada when he came here to live.
Ooh, look at that picture.
The technician, right? Right, when he was 8 years old. And it was at that time he came in and he said, right after this, like 11, turning 12, he said, Dad, I want to make the Hall of Fame. I want to be an NBA champion. I want to make the NBA All-Star team.
Listen, and a lot of kids will say that at that age. You know, you go to schools, you talk to kids, all the kids, they want to be the next Michael Jordan. What did you think as a dad when you're hearing that? Did you want to temper his expectations a little bit?
You know what? I tried to temper with letting him know what it was going to take. I was like, so you understand this means that this is going to be some early morning stuff, you know, before school, you know, before your buddies wake up, you're in the gym, and like you understand what this is. And he's like, I'm ready, Dad, I'm going to do it. I was like, okay. Took out the whiteboard, we wrote NBA Hall of Fame on top, and then we just started writing all the years down to his current age of 11 at the time. And so his first goal was like, by the time I'm 13, Dad, I want to be #1 in Canada. When I'm 14, I want to be #1 in Canada and top 10 in the United States. And by 13, he was #1 in the US, and he's been ever since.
At one point, did you realize that he was going to be the phenom that he came to be? Because I know you two must have played one-on-one, and I know your kid wants to crush you.
We were playing one-on-one, you know, but Daddy still has the crown, okay? You know, I haven't played him in a couple years. You know, I got a bad back.
Smart,
you know, but,
that's the excuse.
I got a bad back.
We're going to stick to it.
But, you know, I saw it actually on the floor against the other children with him. You know, it was in 7th grade. He was finally playing in his own age because he'd always played above his age. And he had these goals about being #1 and wanting to be this guy. And I said, well, RJ, you know, this game you're about to play now, they're saying that this guy is the best player that's in this country. That's your age. And I said, so those kind of goals that you want, well, there he is. Go get him.
Show and prove.
And oh my God, what he did to this kid. You know, I mean, he was so competitive. I saw for the first time, he was always competitive, but I saw for the first time like a lion coming out. Like, you know, he got him in fouls and the kid was going to the bench. He says, you can't guard me. And I was like, whoa, is this my son? I gotta have a conversation with you after the game, son. We don't do that, son. Like, what's going on? But I saw a lion coming out.
He's at like every game. He's always there. Throughout the game, if you're watching me, I look over at him a lot, and he just makes a certain face, and I just know what it is. So we had that certain type of connection, you know, off the court to, you know, loving father, always there for my brother and I.
That is a special bond, you know, but that name came with some pressure.
Yeah, so.
And in the GTA anyway, right here, man, like, you know, he was basketball legend in this town. When you were coming up, people must have been like, oh, that's they must have seen that Barrett and said, well, you better be able to play.
For sure, when I was younger, that used to happen a lot when we'd go out places. You know, oh, you're Ducky's kid, and stuff like that. There was a little bit of pressure when I was younger. I was still trying to prove myself. Everyone would say I'm just getting things because of my dad, but now I'm able to say, you know, I've actually worked for all these things, and it's going great.
You got your own. Yeah. Trying to surpass them.
Yeah, trying to surpass and be my own person. They're gonna be like, oh, that's RJ's dad. So.
We're gonna end it right there. He's not gonna be happy with it, but we're gonna end it right there, man.
So RJ Barrett and his Duke teammates are here for the next few days. They play the University of Toronto on Friday and wrap up their tour on Sunday against McGill.
Our moment of the day is next. We'll introduce you to two friends from Newfoundland who came across a piebald moose, and they really upstaged the moose.
Moosey, 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 moosey. Yoo-hoo! We just are amazed at the size and the grandeur and just the majesticness of it all.
Fantastic. Yes. This is the place.
How do we make money? How do we make money?
Where good ideas.
Oh, wow.
It's amazing what you've accomplished. Yeah. Get great opportunities.
I would invest in you in a heartbeat.
Dragon's Den, Thursdays at 8 on CBC.
Okay, when two friends from Newfoundland caught sight of a rare piebald moose, they did what many of us would, of course, do. They captured it all on video. But it's their colorful commentary that has caught everyone's attention. The video now has like way more than 200,000 views on Facebook. So we had to reach out to them and ask them about their encounter, and that's our moment.
Oh, my blessed Redeemer. Look at the size of him, Nancy.
All of a sudden I went, uh-oh, I bet you I know what that is. That's our famous moose. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing, to be honest. And I've seen lots of moose, but I couldn't believe this one.
I never seen the likes of this before in my life. And we'll never see it again.
Every time you see a moose, there's something magical about them. You want to stop and look at them. You want to take the picture.
I'm getting it all on video. Wow. Wow. All video.
Typical comments that you make every time I see a moose.
Moosey, moosey, moosey. Moosey, moosey.
Yoo-hoo. Stay tuned. We could be up to anything from here on in.
Moosey is, of course, the well-known nature call to bring a moose closer to you. Anyway, these women are so lovely, but Nancy was very worried about the record. They were really worried about the record the whole time, and then even getting home and making sure that they had it because they knew that no one would believe them if they didn't have it recorded.
Well, and I guess the next step for them would be to actually make sure they hold the phone sideways, right? Like, isn't that the best way to take a
lot. You're a professional broadcaster.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't know a whole lot about calling moose over, but if yelling moosey, moosey, moosey does the trick, I bow to them. But it was a valiant effort. Then they're just adorable. I wish them many, many more moose sightings in the future.
I'm working Blessed Redeemer into my everyday life from now on. Newfoundland just has more fun. That's the National for August 15th. Good night.
Good night.